So in this lecture, we're going to be looking at Python list. In other words, I'm going to be introducing you to collections. In the previous lessons, we learned about how to store data inside variables, and we also learned about data types in Python. So in Python and programming in general, we often need to work with a lot of data. So it would be silly if we put each piece of data inside a separate variable, just like this. Alternative to assigning a single value to a single variable like this is that we can have a single variable that contains a lot of data, and that variable will represent a collection. One of the most common type of collections that you would often encounter is the list. Lists are built into Python and are part of the language. So let me show you what a list looks like in Python. Let's say I'm gonna create a list of prime numbers and set it equals to the collection of 5 primes. So the way to do that is by using the square bracket syntax. So I'm gonna open the square bracket and then give my first value, which is 2. Then put a comma. Then give my second value, which is 3. Then another comma. Then my third value, which is 5. Another comma. Then 7. And finally, the last value, which is 11. So however, we've now created a variable called prime numbers, which holds to the collection of 5 values. Now, just out of curiosity, let's actually take a look at the type or category of the variable prime numbers. So I can call my print function and say type parentheses and then pass in prime numbers variable. So when I execute the program, then we see that the type of this variable is called list. So one thing to note is that the list in Python doesn't have to be numbers alone, because a list can contain all sorts of data. For example, here is what a list of strings looks like. So I can create a variable called names, which is equal to square brackets, then single quote, Shoaib, then comma, single quote, Khalid, another comma, then single quote, Adam. And one of the important things to note here is a list is just a variable that holds onto a bunch of values, and it can even hold onto values with different data type. So check this out. I can also create another variable, let's say prime and people, and set its value to equal to square bracket, single quote, Shoaib, comma, 11, comma, 3, comma, and single quote again, then Khalid. So now, even though that we have 3 different lists, one with whole numbers and one with bunch of text, and also the other with mix of numbers and text. However, all of these 3 variables are of the same type. They are of type list. So now that we've covered the syntax of creating a list, I'm going to show you something even cooler than storing data in a list. And this is adding 2 lists together. So in Python, we can actually join 2 pieces of list together, which may even contain different kind of data type. So to illustrate, I'm simply going to create a new variable, let's say noList, and set it equal to prime numbers plus names. So I can also say print, then pass in my noList variable here. And when I run the code, then we see both our prime numbers and list of names in a single piece of list. So the question is, how do you actually pull out a particular value from one of these lists? So here is the secret. The way to grab a particular item from the list is by that item's index. So what do I actually mean by index? Well, the index is just the item's position in the list. Let me show you what I mean. So if I type prime numbers and open the square brackets, and in between the square brackets, I can put a number, and that number is the value of the index. So let's say I put the value number 2, and when I print out the value and also run the code, then I get back the value 5. But you might be wondering, 5 is the third value in this list. So why is it the third item? Well, it turns out that programmers really love counting from 0. In other words, the first item number 2 is at position 0, 3 is at position 1, and 5 at the position 2. But that may not make a lot of sense to humans, but it actually does to computers. So now, oftentimes we're going to be storing the value that we pull out from a list in another variable. So we can do something like best prime is equal to prime numbers open square brackets 4. So in this case, we are pulling out one of these numbers from the list and also storing it inside the variable called best prime. And I can actually print the value of best prime. And then when I run the code, then we also see that we've actually pulled out the value 11. But let me ask you this. Let's say we have a list of eggs and we want to pull out the egg at index 1. So which egg are we going to be pulling out? Or which egg is my egg equal to? The answer is we would be grabbing the second egg in the list. Now, the reason I'm emphasizing on this point so much is because forgetting to count from 0 is super common. And this off by 1 errors will also crash your Python program. So let's check what happens when we say prime numbers square bracket 5. And when I run the program, then we get an index error, list index out of range. And this is because we are trying to select an item beyond the length of the list. Our list has 5 items, and we are trying to select an item from the index 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and the item at position 5 is the 6th one on the list. And since there is no 6th item, then our Python program goes down in flame. List index out of range. So if you ever see these words in your crash logs, now you know why. So to add another value or a prime number to my list of prime numbers, I will use the append method to achieve that. Then in between the parentheses, I'm going to pass in my number, which is 13. And when I print the list of my prime numbers, then we get to see that the value 13 has been added to the list of our prime numbers. So I want to throw this to you as a challenge. Can you try to figure out how to remove the number 5 from the list? I will give you a few seconds to pause the video and give it a go. Did you have a go? So here is the solution. So to remove the value 5 from our list, I'm simply going to say prime numbers, then use the dot notation to access the remove method. So in between the parentheses, I'm going to pass in the number 5. So now, let's actually print out our list of prime numbers. So I can say print, then prime numbers. And when I execute the program, then we see that the number 5 has been removed from our list of prime numbers, which is pretty awesome, right? But one thing to note about removing elements using this function is, if the list contains duplicates of the element you are trying to remove from the list, then Python removes the first occurrence of the value from the list. So we can even try out things like prime numbers.clear. And when I actually print out the list of my prime numbers, then we see that it's actually empty. So the clear function is used for removing all the elements from a list. So we've now come to the end of this tutorial regarding lists in Python. And in the next lecture, we're going to be looking at a different kind of collection, which is called the tuple. So I can't wait to see you there. And as always, take care.